Cool.
Are you ready?
So yes, I'm ready.
I'm about to start
Let's
it off.
do it.
Today, we are doing our episode on the American voter, or the voter,
Yes.
the United States voter. That poor soul. So politics has always been theater, probably, definitely electoral politics. So I guess I shouldn't get too mad at politicians for being actors, primarily. Orson Welles had this great quote about like getting mad at politicians for being actors is ridiculous. Like, what do you think they are? But I would say that since 2008 in the U.S. and I was living in Washington from like 2008 to 2011. In particular in the U.S., and then it's taken over other places. Justin Trudeau here in Canada is a perfect example of it. Politicians' actions and what they actually put forward in terms of ideas and policies, stuff like that, seem to have every day less and less, and now almost zero impact on their popularity. So it's like, that is not what we vote them in for. We vote them in to speak in a certain way, to take this certain kind of pictures, to lift up certain communities or put down other communities, and just in terms of their speech and their tweets and whatever. And I just it seems like it's symbol. It's all just symbolism, and it doesn't matter what they do. Am I missing it?
That's a real unfortunate. No, I think you're 100% right, and that's a real unfortunate trend. That's a real unfortunate trend. I think that whether it was Trump alone or Trump in combination with the coronavirus, I do think that we're going to start to see people, and we're seeing it, people asking more. Like you said, you used to be the weird political guy. Oh my God, here comes Jesse again, right? That's what I used to say. That's what I used to say about you behind your back.
Yeah, you would have done
that. No, I think that here's what I think. This is my prediction. It's somewhat rosy, but not too rosy. I do think that Joe Biden could be the most scrutinized president ever from every direction. That people are going to be looking to see what happens next. Will there be some real effort to reform even people are really looking at the entire electoral process, the voting process, looking at the electoral college, looking at the way Supreme Court justices are nominated, looking at the disparate ways that voting takes place in all the states across the country, and are asking for some, like, how is it possible that this is a mess, and how could that even, people are ready to ask these difficult questions, and I think we're going to see that. I said something similar though in 2008, and I was dead wrong. And so I'm gonna put that straight away and just say, I'm interested to see how it goes. But I think it's gonna be up to people to really demand that, and start and like lead fuller conversations, or else it'll just go back. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm done with the conversations. There's too much conversation. Like, okay, I'm having such a friggin' flashback to 2008 right now. It's terrifying, except with some key differences. So 2008, when Obama gets elected, Bush, it was a campaign for hope, but it was also an anti-Bush thing, right? Like, people were done with Bush. Bush had been seen as this incompetent dude who had set the United States back on the world stage. So many things that are said about Trump were said about Bush, except Bush had like illegally invaded a country and killed 500,000 of its people for oil, along with a whole bunch of Americans dying, or United States Americans dying in that event. He had done this warrantless wiretap stuff, and he had lied. There was just any number of things and reasons, and actually when Obama opened up with this whole thing about, okay, we're going to have a more democratic regime, we are going to open up a thing online, change.org. You go on to change.org and you vote for what you think you want my priorities to be in my first 100 days. And by far the winner...
You remember that?
I do remember that. And do you remember what was by far the winning thing that people wanted him to do in the first 100 days? Prosecute Bush and Cheney. That people wanted Bush and Cheney in front of the courts for the warrantless wiretapping, for the torture, for the war in Iraq, for all these things, and there was the other thing that was happening too, and Obama just said, my inclination is to move forward.
Yeah.
And just sort of, I know we said that we do this whole democracy thing with the change.org, whatever, but I'm going to move forward. And then the other thing that was happening was the financial crisis was happening, and there was this idea that he was going to in some way reform Wall Street, and because Bush definitely wasn't going to do it, so Obama was getting voted in to do that. Nada, no way. Wall Street saw its best years ever came after that, and so there was he was naming his cabinet during that time, and he gave all the best positions to Wall Street people, Timothy Geithner and all these guys, and then now it's happening all over again. It's the exact same thing is happening, and except this time there's no movement based around issues. It's like it's even worse. And instead of people feeling disappointed that Timothy Geithner got named, now we're celebrating that Janet Yellen gets named as Treasury Secretary, because it's a great thing that we're gonna have some reasonable, stable individual in there. As if that wasn't taken for a given. It's really sad, man. This is why I'm wearing my happiest shirt. I said I was gonna wear my happiest shirt for this episode, my most festive shirt, because almost everything I'm going to say today is going to be negative. It's hard to imagine me coming up with anything positive. That's not just cynical humor.
So this is why I think I said he would be not the most effective or the most progressive, but the most scrutinized, the most watched. You don't believe that there's a serious kind of awakening, and I'm not talking about among the big D Democrat ranks. I think that people will be ready to rally behind the president and come up with a bunch of justifications. I think quietly, this Senate, the idea that the Democrats don't have the Senate is a big positive deal, that they have a wonderful way to not have to carry out a set of difficult agenda items. And it's like, what do you want me to do? The Senate,
Yeah, because we're in agreement that most of the people who are in power right now in the Democratic Party don't want any kind of radical changes done to anything.
No. Yes, of course not. Yeah, we're in agreement on that.
Yeah. Yes. So in that case,
no, they don't.
They like having the idea of not having control of the Senate is a great, true reason why they can't change anything.
Exactly.
So from the perspective of the voter, though, or the perspective of people in the United States at this point, one of the things that with my whole society, the spectacle problem that I have moving forward is I don't know where people are going to get their information in terms of what policies should this administration be doing. Are the policies they're putting forward any good? Will they in any way address the problem that they seek to address? I don't see where this is going to happen, because today he names the cabinet. I'm looking at these people in this cabinet, and I'm having this horrible feeling that this is just the team status quo, and I go turn on the New York Times. New York Times is Wall Street hits record high as Biden names Janet Yellen as Treasury Secretary. So, if we do a little recap of the situation, unemployment's through the roof. 8 million American tenants and their families are set to face eviction as soon as that moratorium gets lifted, maybe in January, maybe they'll extend it a little further, I don't know. Predictions of a massive economic depression are almost unanimous, and Wall Street is setting a record high. Now, why the hell is Wall Street hitting record highs right now? It's because there's a massive transfer of wealth going on during this pandemic, again, just like happened in 2008, and now this last bump for them is that Biden just sent them a message that's going to continue for another 4 years of free public money, because he just named the Treasurer or the Fed chairwoman as Treasury Secretary, and that Wall Street's still going to be running the show. They just got that message, and now the stocks are literally at the highest they've ever been, while the country's about to go into an economic depression. And the New York Times, and to get back to the media thing, the New York Times had no analysis of that. There was no this should be worrying.
Yeah, I think
it was this is great. This is wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, and Trump came out today to do like a 1-minute press thing where he took credit for the.
It was great.
For the Wall Street thing. But in terms of what you're saying, let's stick on media. There's a real problem. There's a real limitation about analysis, and it's really bad actually. The collusion between the two parties is strong, and then in order to play that game, and the access, the mainstream and access media limit the conversation. I mean, there's nothing I can say. I mean, I used to be someone who would roll like aggressively articulate a set of critiques of what I would call the mainstream media. And now as somebody who works in CNN and has worked there for 4 years, I have a slightly different perspective on it. My issue, the issue that I see is really related to the entire structure and state of like the pressures involved. There's a weird set of principles that they adhere to in terms of journalism, and there's also an issue with the pressure of like producing content for 24 hours.
Right.
So there's a shorthand that always happens, and it's a shorthand in terms of booking talent to articulate a set of ideas. It's the same sort of people. There are people who say the typical and comfortable thing, and it just keeps getting worse, to be honest. So for that, you're exactly right. There's an issue, and we're dealing with in 2020 I think we're at the beginning stages of a crisis of information, frankly, of genuine information, and I don't really know how that plays out.
There needs to be a focus on corruption. Like, if there's one thing that I think has been the biggest tragedy of like the media landscape in the time of Trump, is that Trump's corruption was not seen as like the major problem, right? That it was, and I get, I'm not saying there should be no attention played to like the way he changed the tone and the discourse and all this stuff. I'm not saying that's not important. I mean, it's clearly important, but the problem with the United States before Trump and with almost every other government is that it hasn't been able to live up to the challenges of our time because it's too corrupt. Because there's a small number of interests that have way too much influence and that have way too much to gain by changing changing the status quo or whatever you want to, however you want to frame the corruption problem. And Trump took it to another level in terms of corruption, not releasing his tax statements, and then not divesting himself of his own holdings as president, and then clearly doing a bunch of things. There was a great website called corrupt.af that was up for a while. I don't know if it's still up. That was just listing all the ways that Trump was using his influence to make himself rich, or his family members or friends or whatever. And the fact that this wasn't the major, like the fact that the impeachment happened over this weird Russia thing, which, had some evidence, but wasn't a open shut case. He should have been impeached on day one for not divesting himself of his holdings as president. Like that. Right. You can't have a president who's owns a bunch of hotels around the world and is also, just like it's too much power for him to enrich himself. And so that should have been the standard on which he should have been impeached, in my opinion. And then as a result, by not having corruption at the front of our minds.
Yeah.
If we don't deal with this corruption thing, we could come up with the best policy ideas ever. But like our podcast we could start doing a podcast about climate change, and we could get 20 million people or whatever watching our podcast every week and organized to make this happen, blah, 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 blah. And it wouldn't matter a damn thing.
Yeah.
Because the system can't handle it. Like, can't handle the kind of changes that would be necessary to actually deal with climate change because it's too friggin' corrupt. And the fact that the media could have done something about that.
No, I hear you, man. Even right now, so for instance, did you know that like right now I'm gonna focus on Trump, but I'm gonna flip it.
Yeah.
There's these leadership packs. You know what a pack is, but a leadership pack is among the least like regulated version of this thing, and there's simply these big slush funds for political candidates, high level political candidates, where they can dole out money to their friends and help people get elected and garner friendship and power. Everyone knows what they are. Donald Trump has a thing up right now, a website up, where he's asking people for donations in order to, overturn the election. But on the bottom, it says 75% of your donations are not going to any legal fight for overturning the election. 75% is going to his slush fund, which he has great leeway and discretion in terms of how he spends that money, for personal and like future political stuff or whatever. And this is common, there's 535 members in the House and Senate around, and damn near all of them have one of these things, man. And it's like, how do we not discuss that? That just goes completely left untouched. And that's one of the things that has to be put up on Front Street from day one in terms of like our expectations for this new administration.
Yeah, because and like this narrative that the thing that was wrong with Trump is that he was an outsider. It's like, and that we need to go back to people with long histories and high positions in Washington. Like that's what's needed. It's like no. You just pick the worst possible outsider. Like an outsider is totally what's needed. Trump cannot be the person we judge all outsiders on.
Yeah. I think very few people would say that, man. I think the outsider thing wasn't his biggest concern. But obviously, when you have kind of not just ignorance of systems, but wanton like flouting norms in the political space, then that's one of the things it's one of the lessons people will try to take. And what I find crazy too is I think
this outsider thing is important. This outsider thing is important because Obama was an outsider, right? Like in many ways, Obama kind of rose out of nowhere. It went from being a state senator to being a senator for 2 years to being presidential candidate to being president. Like bing, 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 bang.
Yeah.
And that was part of his allure in some ways, and that he was going to represent change after Bush, right? And then when he named all these Washington insiders for all his cabinet positions and all these people with ties to Wall Street and all and the military industrial complex and all this stuff, people were there was like a bit of a reaction of like, oh no, oh maybe he's not who we thought he was. And now because Trump is seen as having been an outsider, and that's the narrative around Trump, Biden comes in and we're celebrating the fact that he's naming people with deep ties to Wall Street and deep ties to the past and to the Democratic Party and also. I'm reading The Guardian, which is considered it's one of the places I tend to go to for U.S. news, because they have U.S. based people, but they still have a bit of the view from outside going on. I often like I'm reading The Guardian's article on Biden's cabinet picks. It's like an analysis piece as they were coming out. The first paragraph basically says that the exact quote is, "A dose of insider knowledge and institutional stability might be just what Washington needs." It's like, no, Washington, like everywhere else in the friggin' planet, needs solutions to climate change, inequality, racial inequality, all the, we don't just need people with insider knowledge and institutional stability. That's and that this is because of this narrative. Anyways.
Yeah. Whoever wrote that, I mean, that's an inside the beltway kind of thing. That's DC. People get really excited about that stuff. It's just like polling. That's something I want to say. Can we end polling?
Yeah,
can we get rid of that already? That whole industry, like, it's completely
creative
useless.
Polling.
And frankly,
we should do more creative polling.
I don't even. Yeah, well, how would that? What is that exactly?
I don't know. Just like more interesting questions than who are you going to vote for?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, they supposedly. I mean, supposedly a pretty lucrative industry with people who are talented at sociology and framing and can understand how to write a good question to get an unbiased answer. But I don't get outside of candidates and maybe for media. I don't see the value in polling. Period. Especially when they're getting it wrong. Now two campaigns in a row, completely wrong, way off. And so what I'm seeing is people now, the polls are showing, okay, so Donald Trump had a bump in support from like black men, let's say, and that polling data is being used to make an argument against black men, let's say, you know, in a general way, to sort of claim that there's, you know, what's going on with black men, and people are positing all these things, and it's completely, I think it's harmful. So not only was it not useful in the one way it could be useful, which is to the candidates and to the media, it was completely a trash enterprise there, but then the lingering effect is that now people are looking at, okay, so white women in Texas, you know, didn't, you know, voted at a higher thing, and so now you can make these kinds of assumptions about people.
You know, I'm just thinking about this for the first time, but it seems like it also feeds a bit this society, the spectacle thing that I'm talking about, in the sense where it's like, oh, you know, he got a 2% bump with black men. Oh, I guess this way that he's speaking is black men find attractive, and now Billy has to answer questions, even though Billy didn't take that damn poll. So like, oh, is he speaking to you? Like, it's just like, it's so reductive to everybody.
It is. It's useless. There's no benefit. Again, the one place it could have benefited, and typically would, it failed there. So I say, yo, keep that pushing. The other thing is, you know, in truth, if there's no polling data, that means we might have to spend some time talking about the policies that we're trying to get spoken of. So, I mean, there's just a million reasons to get rid of polling.
Yeah.
It's really rough, man.
The second paragraph in this Guardian article. I'm sorry, I'm just pissed.
Tell me about it.
It's terrible. This stuff, because I'm seeing, this is representative, all right? Like, everything I looked at today. Second paragraph is all about how the people that worked for the Biden campaign are pissed that former Obama staffers are getting all the jobs and they're being left out with the new cabinet. You know, which for the record, this is corruption too, right? Like this sort of I work for your campaign for a few months. Where's my cushy job in Washington? You know, it's like this kind of coverage is in some ways like celebrating corruption, right? For the record,
it does.
I'm okay with people that were on the Biden campaign not getting high level jobs, because I think it says something really terrifying about your judgment, that you thought somebody with clearly declining cognitive abilities and memory loss should be president of the United States. Like if you joined back in the primaries, if you said, this is my dude, Joe Biden, I think you've got judgment issues, and I wouldn't want you in any kind of power. There's nothing in this article about what any of these people can be expected to have done based on their past, or whether or not they are corrupt, or what, from their positions of Secretary of State, Department of Defense, Treasury, whatever. Third paragraph is titled, "Internationalism is Back," and talks about how Obama reached out to the world, and then there's just some general nonsense about how Obama was a president for all the world's people, whereas Trump cozied up to dictators. And nobody can argue with the part about Trump cozying up to dictators, obviously, but Obama also cozied up to dictators, in some ways deep in decades of U.S. imperial policy on Earth. Illegal drone wars, you know, global surveillance, hunting down the people that let the people of the world know they were spying on them, like Edward Snowden. Supported coups in Honduras and Libya and Paraguay and Brazil. I mean, it's like it's just wild to me to see like supposed progressive outlets pretending none of that stuff ever happened, and just looking at the spectacle, but he went around and he apologized in Egypt, and he, you know, whatever, signed the Paris Climate Agreement, and then did absolutely nothing to live up to it, and then when bragged at a conference with the oil and gas industry that he increased oil production more than any president had in history. You know, but we're going to celebrate him for having signed the Paris Climate Agreement instead of for being a corrupt hypocrite. I'm sorry to talk this way about somebody that people hold so dear, but like, facts are facts, and you gotta. I'm reading stuff that's driving me crazy.
Yeah, listen, the Barack Obama era, it's funny because if you look at the Democrat candidates in this go round in 2020, in the primaries, there were several points where in order to get at Biden, they would go hard at Barack Obama, particularly on immigration and a couple other foreign policy stuff, but really immigration. it's funny that within just a matter of 4 years, you can go from the darling, and he's still the darling. I think he's got like 92%. I forget the last. We're going back to polls. Fuck that. I'm not gonna do that. But
no more polls.
I remember getting into some serious heated conversations over Barack Obama from 12 years ago, and how could I not see the beauty of this moment? And I was like, yo, I see the beauty of the moment. I understand the historical this moment, but at the same time, like, we need to talk about the stuff that matters. And so 8 years later, you see that people don't speak about Barack Obama as this transformative figure. And I want to say that that's in part because he wasn't pushed to be that. So we're actually at fault. Like if we look at he comes into office and the mood was just this mood of support and energy and like support for his candidacy.
Yeah.
It made him a less good president.
Yeah.
And his legacy
that's it.
Demonstrates that. And I think if we want people who want to see Biden and Kamala Harris become valued historical figures who really push push the needle towards justice, then the first thing we have to do is accept our duty to push and cajole and criticize.
Yeah.
And to do so in a very serious way.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we acknowledge that Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter both started under Obama. And so it's not like there was no progressive movements, pushing at that point.
It was a progressive movement.
He, but it did take a while to build. Yeah, like everything, all the anti-war, anti-surveillance, anti-torture, all these things that were happening under Bush. Like the marches against the Iraq War were the biggest in history, and I believe for like a 1-day march.
I remember those, man. Those were nutty.
Yeah, and yeah, and that got 2008. That was a race. Like all that energy went into the Obama campaign, and then it was like, the nightmare's over. And I feel like we're seeing that all over again, but with a much less inspiring figure in Joe Biden, and these same industry / party hacks picking up all the power and the positions. And
yeah,
it's okay, here I'll give you while we're on Obama.
Okay.
Because I do believe this history matters. I don't want to sound like trashing Obama, blah, 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 but not just Obama, but the Obama administration. What happened during that 8 years is super important to the future going forward. If we're ever going to actually address anything like climate change or any massive inequalities or in any way diminish the outrageously undemocratic power that Wall Street has. If you look at, I was reading an article about how Joe Rogan's podcast is now going to be exclusively on Spotify, and that you're gonna have to be on Spotify to get the most popular podcast on earth, like it or hate it, Joe Rogan. And so I was reading this article in Vulture. It's like a media website, media analysis, and the guy was talking about a good writer talking about how Joe Rogan's way of speaking and the scandals he gets into are going to put Spotify, which fashions itself as a modern company with some woke sensibilities, Spotify's going to find itself in trouble. And so and he ends with this paragraph. I reckon as we drift deeper into the muck of Joe Rogan getting into trouble, there's a real possibility that it might get harder for people to square the Spotify that has an exclusive deal with the Obamas with the Spotify that has an exclusive deal with Joe Rogan. In this guy's mind, okay, on the virtue spectrum of podcasters, which is, podcasters representing everybody. I'm sure Henry, what the hell is I can't even think of his name. I'm sure there's like plenty of war criminals and stuff that have podcasts. That on the spectrum here, he's got Joe Rogan at the end of like potential damage, like trouble, causing trouble in the world. Because he might say, he's a stand-up comedian who might say things that I definitely disagree with, and I think other people would, from time to time, is over here a danger zone, and Obama's are the example he just grabs to be the paragon of virtue. How is Spotify going to square having Obama, the drone bomber of 7 countries, the deporter of 400,000 Latinos, I don't know, this mass surveillance king, the person who handed over the keys to the Treasury to Wall Street, the person who signed the Paris Climate Agreement and then increased oil production. How are they going to square having him on there with this guy who says some things from time to time that people don't like? And this is the
Obama,
society.
The guy with the drones, the guy who ordered innumerable drones, the person who used the Espionage Act to get whistleblowers. You mentioned that there's so many other things,
but nobody speaks well.
Yeah, it's funny.
He speaks well.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's not a problem.
This writer is. There's so many problems with the thing. He's not talking about an actual analysis of who Obama was. He's simply talking about the fact that Obama is a very well-liked guy.
Yeah.
And the legacy so far of Obama, particularly as he's sandwiched between the guy who invaded Iraq and like this orange blob of idiot who's about to leave office. Barack Obama comes out smelling like fantastic roses, and that's all he's doing. He's not, and that's he's paid to write words, and that's what he wrote.
Wrote some words.
And
I don't know, man.
I hear you, man.
So if you're looking at it as a voter right now, I start to see how there's some people that get a little bit kind of like, you know what? Yeah, let's have a civil war. I think it would be the most terrifying puzzle. I'm not one of those people at all.
Especially as a Canadian.
Especially as I don't live there. Especially as I don't live there. I don't.
Exactly.
I don't want all these people that every time there's an election talk about moving to Canada. I don't want them actually here. So if there's a civil war, I think that a lot of them would come. So, but there's a number. I think but like
who's saying that? Who's saying let's have a civil war?
No, I think maybe they're not saying it, but it's like there's a lot of people talking tough, and I don't.
Sure.
And they're not really providing a model for how to get the change they want, other than just like destroying the enemy. In some way or another.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's like and there was a lot of talk about civil war, potential civil war, whatever, leading up to this election. I don't know how real it was or how much it was just to sell ad clicks online, but I was seeing it mentioned, people talking about it. What happens if he doesn't leave office?
I've seen that.
And what happens if the military's divided? And what happens if blah, blah, blah. I mean, the thing that's crazy, though, is like civil wars tend to be fought over who holds power in the country, right? It's like an attempt to overthrow power. But I feel like, the kind of way I see a lot of people talking about on here is like the real power brokers aren't in the sites at all. Like the right is going to take back America. No idea who it's going to take it back from, or to what moment exactly it's going to go back to, or whatever. It's just like it's just this kind of broad thing. And then the left, there's some very important.
You're asking for specifics, and you're asking for people to speak and be serious about their words. And I'm afraid we're so far beyond that now. The discourse in this country is just kind of loose phrases and terms and marketing, and I'm afraid it really the example for it. The problem is, we talked about this. We talked about for our podcast. One of the things we wanted to do is simply have a good conversation on camera, and
that's
to show what it could look like.
That's your favorite line. But yeah,
that is one of my favorite lines.
Yeah. I just want a good conversation.
No, because it's important. And you said you don't want conversation.
No,
I'm interested. I got to go back to that.
I'm mad. No, I'm saying a bunch of stuff I probably don't believe.
What are you mad at?
I'm saying a bunch of stuff I probably don't believe. I'm mad because I spent most of today reading journalism about Biden's. I did the finger quotes there. Yeah. About Biden's.
I caught that.
About Biden's new cabinet, and it's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying.
So listen, the stuff
that's
you're
why I'm
reading.
mad. So I said no. I'm done with conversation. Blah blah. I only when I said that I was referring only to I'm done with the society, the spectacle where we're just worried about the word choice and the tone, and all that stuff. You know what I mean? I want to have the conversation. I do want to have the conversation. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry, Billy. I know
you do want to have the conversation.
I know. I'm sorry,
Thank you.
Billy.
You do want to.
I know that must have hurt when I said that because that's your favorite. That's one of your favorite things.
I wrote it down. Yeah, come back to it.
I was being provocative. This is why I wore my nice shirt. This is why I wore my shirt that so that it would kind of soften some of the blows. As I lost it.
I'm not mad at you, bro.
Okay,
yeah, listen. The conversation. The problem is that when you talk about civil war or any kind of like a violent act, to me that's a conversation going awry. That's all it is. Now the conversation went to blows because we weren't able to communicate well. And I want to say that we as a country have failed to communicate well for generations, in so many ways, just subtle norms about like when to talk about politics and blah, blah, not on the first date. It's like all these like silly things. And you don't talk religion
how many times
and
did you
don't
get
talk.
told on first dates to stop talking about politics? That happened to you a lot?
No, I have a good, you too, I imagine. Like I've got a good like, thankfully, I think I'm just on the edge where I'm actually good at watching social cues or whatever, where I can catch it. So yeah, I'll stop myself. I can just tell if things aren't there. But
you
the
were
issue
saying,
is, and you touched on this, and I want to just continue on the question of journalism in quotations and like punditry. Here's my issue, yo, real talk. At the end of any political debate or political event, right? There's these rooms full of these pundits and these surrogates and these professional speakers, and they are paid. They're really highly skilled communicators in the political space, and they're paid to say exactly what they will say. They're paid either by the campaign or by some, typically by the campaign, to spin and form narratives around everything that we just saw. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it's a room that exists that reporters could go into and speak to. It's like now that's the only thing that happens. We go into this room. If you're watching a football game and you want to understand football, you want to understand what happened in the game, the last person you speak to is the crazed fan who's like highly motivated, who can't who can't see a pass interference. He can't see it. Like he's so no, it was against his team. And that's what we do. So we have, and so the ethic and the thought process around the journalism is, all right, well, you had one person who's a crazed fan for the Baltimore Ravens. We got to get a crazed fan for the New England Patriots. Right. And so you have that's balance. And then you have two people whose jobs it is to make up stuff and to warp reality in favor of a certain narrative. Mm-hmm. And so that's the model of what a good conversation has been for quite some time now. And we just see it. And I think, you see on YouTube and you see among friends and in the general population, it's like we've all picked up the lesson on, hey, just take a reality, pick your thing, and then just warp it or fashion a narrative that can promote that. And I think that's just a horrible trend, and it's led to a lot of the problems. It's led to the stuff that you're seeing.
I think when I brought up the Civil War thing, it wasn't started to be like, yeah, let's do that. It was more like, no. It's so absurd. It's so absurd that we're talking about, like, even as people bring guns to protests and things like that, to talk about this in terms of a civil war is absurd to me, because every other civil war that I've ever looked at or that I know of, which are most of them are in Latin America, they're the ones that I'm familiar with, the fight at the end of the day is about like really big questions about how government runs, ideology. Is it going to be a capitalist economic system? Is it going to be a communist economic system? Big stuff at play that's going to be fought, right? Whereas like this one, like if this was to go national, like the kind of violence that we see in some of these protests, if it was to go national, it's like, it's not even, it looks more like a national bar fight, right? Between Ravens fans and Patriots fans, where like nobody's really sure what victory would mean, or what they would do if they killed everybody on the other team. It's like there's there's no clarity about anything about, what you would do if you actually had the power, and who has the power, or any of that stuff.
This is a unique problem, and especially in 2020. I don't know what's a more recent coup or civil war that we can look at and see, but in this highly technological age, people are fighting over slogans and symbols and affiliations with people. People are excited about Donald Trump. They're not excited about a set of ideas, really. And I guess Donald Trump sort of represents guns and I don't know.
Have we ever seen him shoot a gun? Have you ever seen him shoot a gun? I don't know. Can you shoot a gun?
No, but that's what he's done. He's just attached himself to certain.
I think he built a coalition of a whole bunch of different types of people that ended up as part of his. Some of them very deep into his cult of personality,
including religious people, by the way, who are praying for him all of the time. The man hasn't read any long book, particularly not the Bible.
Right, but there's characters in the Bible, like King David, for example, who was like a sinner, but that God saw him, even this sinner could be a tool for God's will. Right. So there's a whole bunch of different ways religious people get around. The Bible's a very large book where a lot of things happen, and and God says a lot of stuff, and you can there's ways to incorporate a Trump-like figure kind of into your worldview. It's I think one of the
sad part is just you can incorporate anything, like anything can be interpreted.
Yeah.
I think that's what's weird right now. We are coming into an age where, and Trump represents this in a big time, where Trump and his cronies, I think, are masterfully executing a theory that anything can be interpreted, any narrative can be constructed in any action, and so therefore just act in service of your own selfish desires, and then spin the narrative. And like I said, because for decades we've allowed this, instead of running away from the spin room. Yeah. We put up a sign and we're like, and we marketed it. Oh, check out the spin room. Yeah, this is where people spin things. These people should have been ostracized and ignored. We should have set up systems and incentives where if you're a spin artist, if you're someone who's disinterested in truth and more interested in narrative, you're not likely to get on, And there are people who are willing to speak more in favor of truth. You just have to find them and book them, and not book these other clowns. Yeah. So anyway, long story short, what was you saying before? I forgot.
No, but I think with Trump, like when I'm trying to understand the appeal of Trump, and I haven't done a whole lot of like personal work on this, reaching out to people who support Trump stuff. I've had a few conversations with people, but they were like in New Hampshire, places like this, and. But some of the interesting stuff I've heard from, my friend Emily was talking about, she had some in Wisconsin. She had some coworkers who were Trump supporters, and her analysis of it was that what they liked about Trump, whether or not they realized it or not, was that Trump being such a horrible person. And in some ways being celebrated in the way like a Clint Eastwood would be celebrated for killing the wrong guy and not caring, or something, something like this, like I'm excessive, but so what? What are you gonna do about it? And there's this cowboy figure character to it, but there's also this idea of like, he's never gonna judge me for my flaws if he's worse at it and proud of it. It's like, if he's all his personal defects, he kind of gives. That's a weird psychology, but that is a weird psychology. But
you
have to get into this psychology stuff because otherwise, how do you understand the people who voted for Obama and voted for Trump? It's like the millions of people that voted for Obama that then went and voted for Trump. It's like
I'll tell you what.
If it's just about tone, if it's just about tone, then their tones are complete opposites in some ways. So what explains that?
Yeah, I think
it's about some deep feeling and narrative, how they fit into some universal storyline, and how they speak to your deep psychology that you don't even understand. You just feel it, and then you go fill in the facts to fit your feeling about why you agree with him on whatever.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of that. I think the Democrats are way behind on certain things like YouTube personalities. There is a real serious cottage industry of, so for instance, apparently black men 2-point bump, right? From 2016 to now, Donald Trump, black men moved in Donald Trump's direction.
And here's Billy to explain to us what happened.
Yeah, exactly. Let me tell you about the polls. No, I'm back doing the poll thing, right? Didn't I just say I'm done with polls?
Yeah. Billy, can you answer for
but
your
here,
community?
Exactly, right? Look, I think there's two things. There's this culture personality that he created where it's not about policy or anything meaningful at all. It's just, I think there are people, and I've spoken to some who, like Candace Owens has sold the idea that, and there's some truth to this, the Democrats have, not some truth, there's a huge truth to this, that the Democrats have failed the black community and have taken for granted this 90% plus support from this community. And since the Green Party and other alternatives are considered illegitimate, Candace Owens has marketed herself as this like avant-garde, like, oh, if you're still with the Democrats, you're not thinking right, you know? Mm-hmm. And so what's the only other alternative by that narrow standard is the Republican Party, even as there's this like monstrous racist idiot at the helm. They were able to get some people to go over, and the culture around it had people going, you know, there are guys who can argue, who would argue that they're just 4 years ahead of you. Like, you black people who still vote Democrat, you're still voting Democrat, and that was part of their thing. Which is why one of the biggest things I would like to see happen is a growth in the legitimacy of alternate parties, particularly the Green Party. The Green Party, who has fielded, I know many people are excited for Kamala Harris to swear herself in as vice president, and I'm excited to a degree. But I do know that the Green Party has run a black candidate at not just at vice president, but at president, a black female candidate. In 2008, it was Cynthia McKinney and Rosa Clemente as vice president. Cynthia McKinney was a member of the House of Representatives, and she ran on the ticket as president. And Rosa Clemente is a Latin American woman, I believe she's from New York. I don't know which borough. Rosa Clemente worked out here in Maryland as well, and I met both of them at the time. But yeah, I mean, if you're excited by that, if that kind of marker of progress is energizing to you, well, the Green Party can speak to you there. And then if we get into policies, you know, I'm down to do that as well. I find that a lot of, like, for instance, these what was it? Ice Cube wrote up a policy plan, and so many other people write up these policy plans, trying to see some change in the Democratic Party. Some of this stuff overlaps very neatly with the ideas that have been presented by the Green Party for decades. And, you know, but it just doesn't get out there because there's a real collusion between both parties in terms of determining who is a legitimate candidate and what are legitimate parties. And that's something to fight through. And I think the U.S. voter, which is our topic, the U.S. voter would benefit mightily from you know, accepting the fact that the Green Party exists. We don't need to duplicate our efforts. They've been at this for a while. All of the obstacles about getting signatures on ballots and this and all these things, they've been at this for a while. And, you know, that's something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely be. I mean, it's the Debates Commission, for example, in the United States. People think that's sort of like some sort of neutral institution, maybe, or something like this. But no, that was set up. I can't remember the whole history of it, but there used to be a much more neutral debate situation in the United States where third parties could get in, or third candidates if they had a certain amount of support. I can't remember exactly how it worked. And then the two parties came together and said, you know what, screw that. Let's start our own debates commission. We'll only do debates through the commission that we set up as parties as a private corporation, I think it is. I'm not sure. It's the Commission on Debates, or the Commission on Presidential Debates. And they basically set it up in a way that no third party will ever get into a debate, as it currently stands. And, you know, that's...
and there's some great footage of Ralph Nader in 2000, who, for whatever their marker for getting into that debate is a certain, you have to poll, again, back to the polls, you have to poll at a certain percentage. And Ralph Nader was just short of that, but he was packing stadiums the way that the Orange Idiot was packing stadiums, like full of people excited to hear this progressive message. And he was excluded, and there's footage of him being escorted off the debate premises with by police, because the two parties said no, this man, and his access to the debate stage, his ability to stand on that stage alongside the two major parties and ask the difficult questions that the two parties sort of agreed not to deal with, could have been game changing, but they didn't allow it to happen.
Yeah.
Let me just say one more thing about the Green Party, because I only mentioned Cynthia McKinney, Rosa Clemente from 2008. In 2020, the vice presidential candidate was Angela Walker, who is a black woman who is worth Googling. And the presidential candidate himself was Howie Hawkins. So, again, this isn't the thing to hang your hat on. I don't think it's like everything, but I do know many people for whom the ascension of Kamala Harris is a big deal, and I want to speak to them and say, I hear that, and that's just not the only thing. If you still find the Democratic Party to kind of fall short in a general sense, like, here's some options.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have much to add to that. Just to say that the adding another party or two is not immediately make things better, or maybe or like considerably better.
Not immediately.
Not immediately. I'm just saying, like, we have a lot of issues in 3-party, 4-party democracies as well. And you still the amount of, for me, the amount of corruption in your system is like the biggest problem. It's because we've elected third party NDP or Green Party coalition governments in provinces here in Canada, not yet at the federal level, and they've made subtle changes, but one of the most progressive provinces in Canada elected a NDP, which is our third left-wing party, like our left-wing party that's to the left of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and the Green Party. They made a coalition government in British Columbia, and they're the people sending the police to arrest Indigenous matriarchs for defending their land from pipeline construction to move more fossil fuels, and despite the fact that they don't have permission to be on that land. And so I'm just like going against all the things that they've signed, saying that they're going to reconcile with Indigenous people, the UN Commission, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which they ratified, going against their own Supreme Court case, going against also. So I'm just saying, and it's all because this is a $6 billion pipeline. That's it. That's all. So at the end of the day, if you have a corrupt system, you can have 80 parties. You can represent the pepperoni pizza only party. You can have everybody in there, and as long as the most richest people in the country can just pay them off, that's good luck.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
After my whole Green Party spiel, you're just gonna hit me with that.
I'm just super frustrated about how we don't talk about corruption. How it's it's no longer a topic.
It's funny because you're calling things that we would in this country are openly legal and fine. Yeah. And
no, corruption's legalized there, for sure.
For sure.
It's legalized in most political systems, but in the U.S. it's completely out of control.
I have a question. What do you think about the fact I saw something that said that this is another poll. Jesus, am I doing this?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's keep going.
Yeah.
I saw a poll, 70% of something like 70% of Republicans believe that our voting process is flawed and rigged. I don't know what the Democrat thing is. I told myself I would look, and then I forgot to look. But it's probably a high number there too, but in a different way. It isn't about, they may not use the word rigged. They might not be focused on voting machines, but they would be focused on broader systems, in relation to campaign finance and gerrymandering and the Electoral College.
Yeah.
I think this is a very interesting opportunity for Joe Biden to lead a bipartisan effort to make some major changes in our voting systems structures. and processes. What do you think about that? And I think it'll be very interesting to see that it not happen, even though everyone's clamoring for it.
Is
and there's so
everybody
many other
clamoring for
things
it?
and issues that work like that.
Is it like is there a lot of people talking about that?
Not on TV so much, but I think that I can only speak in an anecdotal way about this. I have people on different sides of the spectrum politically who agree heavily on like some kind of a structured way that can be where integrity is at the center of it, and you know, where the popular vote is more valuable than all these electors and the electoral college and all this stuff. So depending on who we're talking about, you know, who we're talking to, you'll hear, like I said, it's a focus on like the machines or on whatever. But it seems like, yo, this is a moment to talk about that, and I doubt it's gonna happen.
I'm sorry to come so cynical on top of this one, but you know, in 2015,
thanks, Jesse,
we're gonna have to do a whole episode someday on Justin Trudeau so that I can explain some of my cynicism when smooth talking, well speaking, photo op, greatness, celebration people come to power. But Justin Trudeau ran on many things he didn't do. One of the things he ran on when he won his first election in 2015 was that he was going to do electoral reform, which Canadians had been asking for a long time. Like I don't know if it's as ridiculous as the Electoral College in the US, but it's called first past the post. It's a very silly system, and it gives way too much power, like almost dictatorial power, to anybody who gets like 39% of the vote nationally, basically. And so that's Trudeau wins power in this way in part by making this promise. This was the first thing he was going to do, and he gets in there and he immediately starts to kind of like lower expectations about it, blah blah blah. Has a commission. The commission comes out and it's like 70% of the people in the commission say, yeah, we should have what's it, I can't even, some form of proportional representation electoral system. Trudeau says that the 70% is proof that there's clearly no consensus, and so we're just going to shut this down. Anyways, just to say, there was no way ever, like he ran on a campaign to do this in a country that had been asking for it, where it is an election issue here, is electoral reform, and won on that, and then still it was just never going to happen. And because the Liberal Party is too much of a cash cow for the powerful in this country, that there's no way they would pass a law which would guarantee them never to get that majority power again. Probably we would end up with more mixed governments, basically. And so that just made me very cynical of that being the path alone, like that some politician is going to just do this to themselves. Like, I think it would need some sort of massive social movement calling for it. But I think there could be a social movement that squashes some of this Patriots versus Ravens divide that we've been talking about.
But that's what I'm saying. That's exactly why I tried to, point out the Republican, the fact that there are people who are pro-Trump, who I disagree with on several things, but on the question of like, how do we shore up our elections? How do we now, it'd be interesting to see, like, I know people who ask the question, like, I get on my phone and I bank with my phone. Mm-hmm. Like, I do very private and personal and important transactions through my phone. People ask why can't there be an app that could confirm my identity and then do that and could be validating and full of integrity. I don't know. I don't see why not.
You mean like to have
right?
referendum? You mean like to have like a referendum on something? Is that what you're talking about? You would vote through your phone?
I'm actually just talking about electoral,
okay,
politics, voting for members of Congress and for the president. But
right.
yeah, even referendums, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Why not? Like, we're coming into a whole new era. I mean, the creativity that is possible if we put our minds to it. If the real goal is to extend the franchise as wide as possible and to make it as easy as possible. The whole time I'm watching your face, you're like, whatever.
Well,
whatever.
No, because
Canada went through this 10 years ago. Blah blah blah.
Not even. I'm just like, it's funny because it's some of the first times in recent memory where I'm like, I would have been all for this. I would have thought, like, up until recently, I definitely would have thought it would be great to have a society where everybody was engaged in politics. I think it would be great. And now I'm seeing a society where everybody's engaged in politics, and it's just getting crazier and crazier. It's just getting further and further away from actually talking about the issues, and it's a bunch of people just screaming about symbols. I'm generalizing. I'm eliminating millions of people who are doing really hard work around policies and issues from my analysis. But
yes, you are.
Yeah, I don't know.
No. I hear you. I hear
hate
what you're
to bring
saying,
my
though.
cynicism into this future world of mass participation.
Yeah, man. For some reason, I want to be hopeful here. And I'm just as cynical.
It's self-preservation.
As you are in a lot of
Self-preservation.
ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to be hopeful here. I think in particular, I feel really good about, as opposed to 12 years ago, I feel good about our capacity to engage.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember 12 years ago being really anxious and uncertain, in some ways, just like you. I'm looking at this and I'm seeing it all again, and because of that, though, we can engage, we can because I'm the conversation guy, like, we can have conversations and say stuff, like, and say it in a fairly useful way, because we're not unfamiliar with, like, the trends on this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's weird. One of the things that I think is weird, frankly, is we're coming off of 4 years of seeing a much increase. So this is a much increased conversation on race and racism, and people have been articulating narratives about racism in our structures, and have even, some of the stuff I think I can quarrel with a little bit in terms of our understanding of just how pernicious, like, police violence has been on the lives of black people at large in America, things like this. My issue is I'm interested to see how these people will translate all of that, and they're attempting to translate this narrative and then say, oh yeah, so Joe Biden is the guy who's gonna fix all that, No, the anger and the, like, palpable concern about America and its, like, likeliness to care for dispossessed populations, no one can be confused or fooled by the idea that Joe Biden is going to be the vessel for that, or that Kamala Harris would be.
Billy, you started this whole paragraph by saying, I gotta be hopeful. I'm gonna find the hope here, and so I'm gonna put that back on you, because we gotta wrap this up. So I'm just gonna put that back on you to find some hope, ASAP, like, real quick.
Find some hope. The hope is in just asking, just being present, and making sure the conconversation continues.
I knew I should have said, you're not allowed to use the word conversation.
Here's the thing, no, because Jesse, the problem is that everything is a conversation, It's not about communicating words verbally. Okay? Everything's a conversation, and Donald Trump made that conversation untenable. It was impossible for us to look at the same fact, the same event, and come up with a coalescing narrative, a narrative that we can all agree upon. It was impossible because he was intentionally infecting that.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is that there's an opportunity now to begin to sort of do that, but that gives us a foundation to then, like, ask and demand for, like, political, for political change. But that's the end goal. The conversation isn't awesome in and of itself, but it's essential, or else we're just stuck in this bullshit.
I'm just terrified that I think there is a real opportunity right now in the fact that neither party talks about issues, so that you can now start talking about issues in a way that's not seen as party politics in some way. So it's like, I'm really terrified about this idea of, we're going to heal the country by reaching out to Republicans, and it's like, well, it's like if you're somebody who believes that climate change is the most important thing, how are you going to reach out to somebody who believes that stopping this massive children's sex cannibalism ring is the most important thing in the country? Like that would be a crazy task to go on. So the idea that you can heal the country by just starting to talk about problems or not even or visions for the future, and without reference to the Patriots and the Ravens, without reference to those political parties for a while. Like this for me is like a potential place of hope. If that political energy could somehow move in that direction and away from these parties for a while.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But that's the whole thing, and that's why I love what we're doing with this podcast, is to try not, like, we're going straight at it. We're talking about the political parties, but typically we don't do that. It's like, can we talk about issues? The problem is that for many of us, myself included, I guess, maybe not so much, but for many of us, there's an attachment to, we instead of like assessing a situation, there's a keyword or a buzzword that connects to either Republican bad, Democrat good, X, Y, Z, and so there's this like, okay, that's the right move, as opposed to getting into the nuanced and difficult nature of any of these conversations. And the problem is, and I'll speak as someone who works where I work, man, the problem has a lot of its roots in the model conversations that are occurring on our television sets and on our phones, where millions and millions of people are watching. I don't know if that's hopeful, man. I don't know if I've given you any hope right now, bro.
No, you haven't. But but it's all right. I knew this was going to be the hopeless episode. We've done a lot of uplifting episodes. This one's about the perspective of the American voter. It would be hard. It would be hard to turn around.
Have the two parties successfully maneuvered into a place of pure iconography and marketing, where they don't have to address anything in a meaningful way.
That's what I'm afraid of. That's what, like, Justin Trudeau won re-election in Canada with having done pretty much nothing that he promised to do except legalize marijuana, which, people in the U.S. might think is the most amazing thing ever. So I've talked to some people who say that's like absolutely incredible, but it's happening in the U.S. anyways now. It's really interesting. It's happening in blue states and red states and all kinds of stuff. It's really fabulous. But like, that's for all the things that he promised to do. It's like a pathetic result, that's the only thing that actually happened. And in many ways did the opposite of what he said he was going to do, and then got reelected. So this is obviously a bigger problem than just the United States. Also, he got away with a corruption scandal, that the SNC-Lavalin corruption scandal, and along with other corruption scandals, but there's a current one happening right now with the We Charity, it's called. He's been involved in corruption scandals that in the past in Canadian history, almost every time the Liberals or the Conservatives have been knocked out of power in Canada, it's been because of some corruption scandal. Corruption scandals often involving numbers that would be laughably low in the United States. Like how much somebody got, $100,000 here or something like this, and it's like governments fall in,
amateurs,
and just losing all. Honestly, amateur stuff, like playing checkers, instead of chess, and the major party getting wiped out of power as a result. And Trudeau's survived multiple corruption scandals at scales way larger than anything that knocked out these previous governments. And it's like it's totally the society of the spectacle. It's totally that there's just people who just feel like that's couldn't have been him, They just feel like, I'm sure he tried to stop it, and I think next time he'll do better. Or like, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Or they just don't want to hear it, or they just never hear it,
The expectations are so low.
It's crazy.
Ralph Nader used to talk about how politicians used to be heralded, and these were like the cream of society. Like people, hey, please represent this, and now politicians, no one expects anything but corruption and lies, and that's and it's horrendous.
Especially the people that love them. I don't know. Anyways, let's end this, because this is spiraling into deeper and deeper pits, and
Okay.
and we're trying to keep it upbeat and future facing, right? Typically, I think.
Typically, we end it future facing and positive.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm
attempting
struggling.
it. You've been an asshole this whole time. As soon as we turn the fucking camera on.
All right, so let's just agree that this episode is not going to end like that, and you'll have to come back and for episode 10 if you want some of that classic Billy and Jesse, loving banter and uplifting conclusion.
I'm hopeful, not about the Biden administration. I'm positive about people's propensity to stay interested for longer than usual here. I have a feeling that we can pull this off, the collective we, and be interested and demand more, and have him have to deal and contend with a few things. I don't know what, but I don't see the fawning love and adoration that Barack Obama had. Right? He's a less impressive person in a number of ways. And I think people are like, ugh, this is like, people are like, wow, I got engaged to get rid of the idiot, and I have.
It's like you're gonna have to do something to keep me engaged, kind of thing. Because you just speaking is clearly not gonna do it. Yeah, maybe you're right.
No,
I agree. That's hopeful. Let's end it right there before we say another word. I really do believe we should just cut it, because it's just a matter of seconds before we spin back to something horrible, I think.
Exactly.
We'll
see how it goes, man.
The most hopeful thing we could come up with is that the guy who won is so wholly uninspiring that he will have to do something in order to keep people in any way engaged with his administration. I agree.
Something like that.
Great episode, Billy. This has been great. Actually, yeah, I'm glad we got some of this stuff off our chest. We'll be back for a more typical Where's Now episode. All right, man. And I'll be seeing you in episode 10.